All right. So let's test this. Son of a bitch.
Pfizer. I like Pfizer.
You like Pfizer? Yes, we are on YouTube. Pfizer is like the best thing that
And
has ever
Moderna,
happened to the
dude.
medical community. I guess
Moderna,
Moderna is
wow.
a good runner-up, but Pfizer is really the.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know which one is winning my heart, but it's a
It's a
close
close
battle.
race. Close race. We're gonna have to have a
I
photo
mean,
finish.
then of course the Sputnik is super bad, right?
Which what's super bad?
The Sputnik vaccine.
What's that?
It's the Russians' vaccine.
Oh, yes, correct.
It's called they call it Sputnik.
Because all things Russian are inherently evil.
Right, right. I
Yes,
mean,
they all
the
Russians should be
CDC
illegal
hasn't
on the
even
face of the planet.
the CDC hasn't even recommended it.
Yeah, like clearly it's toxic trash if that's the case.
Right. But my my buddy Dima, who's from Ukraine, he told me that the Russians figured out a way to maximize vaccine efficacy. They just said that if people claimed that they got the COVID again after being vaccinated, then they must have not gotten vaccinated.
Oh, there you
So
go.
anyone who reports that they get it again now gets a penalty
That,
because
that,
they're
that,
obviously not vaccinated.
that's Soviet style data collection right there.
It's a Soviet style problem solving.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Nima, can you check our audio?
Yes. Are we on Odyssey now?
Yes. I mean, it's telling me that we're on Odyssey. You tell me.
Doesn't seem to be showing up on Odyssey. Usually it would show up on our home. Oh, it is. Weird. Okay. It says December 22nd. Doesn't seem to be showing
Oh,
up on
I got the date wrong.
Derp. Usually it would show up on our home. Oh, it is.
It sounds like we sound good.
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good.
So, hopefully we're not going to do a whole fucking show again and then have the sound come out bad despite the fact that people are warning us in the middle of the show. We're just like, fuck you.
Your problem. Restart your browser.
Yeah.
I'm gonna eat outside of the screen real quick. Sorry.
We're streaming and recording, Nima.
I know. I just need some energy.
Yeah. So while we're bullshitting before starting the show here, those chalk supplements, I think I'm really feeling the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the Tomcat.
I got the Tomcat, the Daily Men, whatever, and the Ashwagandha.
I also recommend Super Female Vitality from Infowars.
Yeah?
Infowarsstore.com.
You take
Super
it?
Female Vitality. I take it every day, yeah.
Why do you give it to your newly acquired fiance?
No, she gets Super Male Vitality.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
I see how this relationship is. I got some more calls out of Florida yesterday. I got 3 of them,
Oh, good job.
and one of them's an hour away from you.
Okay.
So,
Wait, what city?
fuck me. Hold on. I don't know no geography in Florida.
Central Florida.
Yeah. Okay. Central Florida. No, it's not that far.
Well, this is South Florida, yeah.
I don't know. If I go from Miami north an hour, like West Palm Beach, is that an hour away?
That's more like 2 hours away.
Let's see.
An hour north would be maybe Boca Raton-ish.
That
But it
sounds,
is-
that sounds more.
But it is Palm Beach County, so you're leaving Miami-Dade County, driving through Broward County, and then you're arriving in Palm Beach County. Not too far from Mar-a-Lago.
Well, it looks like in between Palm Beach and Boca Raton. Anyway, it's close-ish. It's not a huge one. I had a guy call me. He's got 119 units. He's like, I won't accept $1 less than 33 million. If you're $1 less, don't even call me back.
So it's like Monty Python, The Life of Brian. 70 shekels and not a shekel less, or strike me death. 60 shekels. Done.
No, I think this guy meant it. He gave me a assertive negotiating personality type.
Well, it sounds like he's already been negotiated with and annoyed by it.
Well, he has been, and I think where he's coming from, because he sounds like he's pretty savvy. He's been through this a lot. Is that if I budge on this, he's going to get me to budge on other stuff. So that I think that's what he's testing, because at the end of the call, because he's like, it's got to be 33 million, it's got to be 33 million, and I say, well, what if I come in, I'm like 32,999,000, and he's like, nope, don't even call me back. I'm like, okay, no. I see what you're doing. You done eating yet? Can we start this damn show?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Making sure. All right. Gnosticism.
I'll bring my plate.
Okay. All right. I'll just tap dance while you're gone to entertain the audience here.
Okay.
Alrighty, I'm gonna do our opening. So, stay tuned. Here we go.
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Hello, this is Dylan Moore and Nima Major of IridaTV. Coming to you today is actually December 23rd. 2022, I wrote December 22nd, 2022, because honest to God, I don't give a shit about dates. I'll admit it. I'm always screwing up the dates because I don't care.
Yeah, the history class has spoiled it for you.
Yeah, well, I've always had, like, jobs and stuff on the weekends, and I never did the Monday, well, I have occasionally, but most of my life, I never did, like, the Monday for Friday thing, and I was never really concerned what day of the week it was, and I've just never cared that much. I know it's important. Obviously, you gotta schedule things, and I gotta show up at the airport at the right date if I want to catch my airplane and stuff. But I mean, for something like this, I just don't care what day it is. But it is December 23rd, 2022, and we are here. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, day, whatever, 5 or how many days they have?
I don't know. How many things are on a menorah? Don't care, not Jewish.
7. I think it's 7 or 9.
So, in fact, I'm glad we started talking about Christmas and Hanukkah right here at the beginning, because we're actually going to talk about something even weirder. Gnosticism. This is a follow-up from our last show, and it's kind of a repeat because we screwed up the audio so badly, nobody could understand us from the last show. So the show before last, we were talking about the, what's a good way to put it? The logical conclusion for God. I know that it's the transcendental argument, but essentially it's saying you can't utilize logic to address God versus no God without assuming God, was the conclusion that we came to. And if that ruffles your feathers, good. Go back and listen to the show. It's the last one.
I mean, you can't. So you the short is you can't So making an argument against God is kind of like making an argument against arguments.
Right. You're making an argument, so your actions self-defeat whatever it is that you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's more behind it. It sounds like a lazy syllogism otherwise.
Right.
But yeah, that's basically the idea that when you're making an argument, you're assuming a lot of concepts that you can't really account for. And these concepts are things like logic, like induction, like time, like an external reality, an internal knowledge, a commingling of the two in a way. You're assuming meaning, right? We talked about the cogito ergo sum, where Descartes and the foundationists claim they have stripped off all the uncertainties, and he's arrived at this prime the ultimate certainty of I think, therefore I am, and it makes no assumptions, no reference to any other concepts that are unproven. I think, therefore I am. I think, so something is occurring, but you're making a whole lot of assumptions. You're assuming that words have meaning. You're assuming that language has meaning. You're assuming that you're communicating some opinion, and on the other end, there's a recipient of that opinion who can receive it. So we have separate entities. We have knowledge. We have external reality. We have induction because of therefore. We have time. We have I think, and so I am. We have. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Whole big list, yes. And as I was saying, please go back and listen to that show because I think it was great. We went over some good stuff. But today, we're going to be going over something that actually irritates me a bit. Gnosticism. So, and one of the reasons we want to go over this is because at some level, I think it's relevant for understanding the power structure on Earth right now and the beliefs of people who don't necessarily make their beliefs obvious. I get irritated with Gnosticism because I get the feeling that they try to use Greek to obscure what they're saying when they could just translate it into English. An example, I was talking to a guy who I don't know if he considered himself a Gnostic or he was just kind of flirting with the idea, but he wanted me to reference some Gnostic writing called the.
Should we give a brief primer on Gnosticism first before talking trash about it?
Fine. Take it away, Nima.
So Gnosticism. Actually, maybe let me just sum it up.
Yeah, take it away, Nima.
From what I understand, Gnosticism is a variation of the biblical creation story, where the Gnostics believe that the God who created the universe is not the Almighty God, but he is a lesser divinity, also referred to as a demiurge, which I think is sort of
See, we're already
Satan,
starting
basically.
what exactly what I was complaining about. Demiurge. Keep talking. I'm just going to open up an etymology dictionary.
So basically, a lesser deity that's created the earth, a lesser deity who was created by the ultimate unknowable being, and who wanted to recreate the world, but he forgot some details, so he made the world not so great, and that's why we have suffering and evil in this world. And Adam and Eve were trapped by this demiurge in Eden, and the snake was a good guy sent by the greater God who wanted to rescue them. And also Jesus was apparently also sent by this higher God to rescue people out of the demiurge's world.
And this is a higher God that is outside the realm of existence, right?
Yes. Yes, which that is also true for the standard Christian doctrine to some extent, except that God has a human form.
And he has a Holy Ghost that interacts in the
Yes,
material realm.
true.
Yes.
Right. So there's a father who we never see, and then there's the father who creates or who pushes the creation, the son who's the bridge between humanity and God, and the spirit who perfects God's creation over time. And so yes, the spirit interacts with humanity, but not as a
Direct like that.
yeah, I guess not as a visible personal being that people can converse with or whatever.
So, are you still going on Gnosticism?
Well, okay, so basically Gnosticism is this idea that this earth was created by a lesser god, by an evil god. We have to collect and attain all the knowledge to escape from this, basically, the prison of this earth.
Right, and of course,
so-
Gnosticism coming from the Greek word gnosis, which means
Right.
knowledge,
Right.
or to
So
know.
that's a lot of, I think a lot of elites, a lot of the transhumanists, they are Gnostics because they believe that humanity has to be perfected and improved and worked on. The great work. I think it's also a Masonic idea. Oh, and by the way, the demiurge is an artisan. So
Yeah, I
like,
pulled that up. So,
builder.
demi comes from demos, for people, like democracy, and urge, I guess, is from ergos, which means works. So basically, the people that work, or the way that I guess the meaning in ancient Greek was more like skilled worker, like Nima was just saying. So the creator of this universe is a word that means like skilled worker.
Yeah.
And then
Probably
in this etymology dictionary right here, it actually says in the Gnostic system, this word means to be something as conceived as being subordinate to the supreme being, like Nima just said, and sometimes as the author of evil. Exactly what you just pointed out. And I think it's worth saying, and I'm actually going to bridge this into something else here, is that with this idea that possibly an evil entity created the material universe, it puts you at odds with material reality. Material reality is fundamentally bad, right? And when you're talking about we have to perfect ourselves away from material reality. I mean, it's almost Platonic, right?
Yeah, and I think it is. There's a lot of overlaps with Platonism. So yes, Plato also believed that there was a higher, impersonal, unknowable spiritual force, and that depending on how enlightened you've become as a philosopher in this earthly life, you will join that higher entity in some higher or lower function, or maybe not. Maybe you just get maybe you get reborn as Nancy Pelosi. So
wouldn't that be great?
would obviously, right?
Yeah. Oh man.
There's different levels, or I mean, you could be reborn as a cute little otter, which I would probably prefer.
Nima comes over to my house, and he flips on YouTube, and there's this Japanese guy who owns these otters, and he makes these videos of river otters, and he's like, "Look how cute these river otters are," and I'm like, "Yeah, they're pretty cute." But he thinks about otters a lot. What I wanted to bridge, and then can you flip our video back on, is so again going back to that the Gnostic mindset is at odds with material reality. When I was like 20-ish, 19, 21, something like that, I was hanging out with a buddy of mine who was into all this sorts of shit, and if you didn't know, Gnosticism, I mean, we're talking about the elites, but Gnosticism just as as something that you can go join is still a thing today. You could go do it, and my buddy took me to this family who were Gnostics, and they did like a Gnostic service inside their own home. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever, I'll go check it out. And the topic of the sermon, I'm not going to say I remember exactly what happened fucking 16 years ago or whatever, but there's two important things that I remember. First off was an understanding of the symbolism of the pentagram. And the understanding that they gave was like, okay, if we look at the pentagram, it's got 5 sides, and we can either point it up or point it down. And the 5 sides represent the 4 elements of the material world, which is these classical elements: fire, water, earth, and air. And the 5th one represents the spirit, or basically you, like the soul of you. And if the pentagram is right side up, then that means you use the 4 elements to serve you. Whereas if the pentagram is upside down, you serve the 4 elements, and that's, I guess, representative of the of Satanism, right? Where you become a slave to the material reality. By the way, that's Nima just held up if you're listening, held up the metal horns.
If the 2 corners point up, it kind of looks like the horn symbol.
Yeah. Well, and then just side note, my son is 2 years old, and whenever someone asks how old he is, this is how he. He doesn't do this. He does this. So, and then the second thing, they pulled up the Kabbalistic tree of life, which we're going to be talking about that at some level here. And the I'm going to complain about Gnosticism, but I'm gonna give credence to the Kabbalistic tree of life, because I think it's so cool, because it operates as a map that you don't have to have like a Jewish mysticism hat on to appreciate. It's really easy to map any creation or religious concepts. I mean, you could be Buddhist and map your concepts onto this, Christian, whatever. And there's 10. Let's pull up a Kabbalistic tree of life for me, would you? So there's 10 spheres on this, and you're going to count it and be like, no, there's 11. Well, according to Kabbalism, 1 doesn't count. It's the 4th one down, and or the second one down in the middle, called Da'at. That one technically doesn't count. And they start from the top is 1, and then you kind of go in this lightning bolt. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 is the center, second from the bottom, and 10 is on the bottom. 10 is called Malkuth. No, I'm not pronouncing these correctly. I have no idea how to pronounce Hebrew. 10 is called Malkuth. And that represents the physical reality that we all see. So all these 9 things, or 10, depending on what you consider Da'at, all these 9 things above material reality are like different dimensions. So, like, everything that we see is just like one tiny dimension out of the 9 dimensions above us, right? And the top one is supposed to be God, and you can kind of create you can definitely create a creation myth that emanates from God all the way on down. And so the second one from the bottom is Yesod. And Yesod is also referred to as foundation in English. Malkuth is called the kingdom or the world, or even in modern times the universe, as the actual reality that we exist in. Yesod is foundation, and this is where our intention lives. So we can like if you visualize something and then you go toward that visualization, that you're setting up the foundation of what you're about to do, if that makes any sense. So the sermon was about this sort of stuff, which is, kind of sort of cool. But the thing that I don't like, you can turn that off, Nima. The thing that really rubs me the wrong way about Gnosticism is this conflict between spirit and matter. Whereas in the traditional Christian the traditional Christian tradition. In the Christian tradition, the non-heretical Christian tradition, matter is essentially good because God created it. The good God, not this demiurge God, created it, right? And so because matter is essentially good, we need to do good things in the universe, in physical reality. So you can see where if you have a society that believes, okay, material reality is essentially bad versus material reality is essentially good, let's talk about the foundation of intention and your actions of what you're going to create in that reality. If reality is fundamentally bad, you're going to create bad. I mean, you're not going to worry about creating good stuff because there's no point, right? You're not going to worry about making actual good things in material reality. Versus if you accept that material reality is essentially good, you got to say, okay, we have to do good things within material reality in order to, because it's connected with the spiritual aspect of ourselves. So I am irked by the concept of complete rejection of material reality, because it's it leads you to ideas of, let's become the elite, and because we understand the perfect nature of non-material reality, we can just do whatever we want in material reality and call it perfection, And whether that's, okay, let's establish a world government and reduce the population and just destroy the earth and all that sort of stuff, that's fine because we're perfecting ourselves spiritually, and the material reality is irrelevant junk, right?
Also, I think ideas like the metaverse, living in virtual reality for eternity, those are based on that same notion that material is bad, my body is bad, and why not just hook up to Matrix-style computer and get constantly pleasant stimuli, kind of like Brave New World, get drugged up or whatever.
Yep.
If it feels good, feels better, great. And the Earth is evil anyways. The demiurge who created us is evil. We have to rise to a higher spiritual realm to surpass him.
Well, and then actually, let me draw that on the Tree of Life. Can you pull the Tree of Life up again? So if you start at the top, there's a top triad. There's 3 triads in the Tree of Life. There's 1, 2, 3, and again you skip that da'at in the middle, and then there's 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, and then after that you get Malkuth, the kingdom, the physical reality that we actually live in. So da'at is the line of separation between everything below is what exists in the physical world, and this is going to sound confusing because everything about this damn thing is confusing. But so Malkuth is the actual physical world, but even ideas exist in reality, right? So everything below this, even if you're in these basic dimensions of formative ideas, even formative ideas are within the universe. So above Da'at is this realm of non-existence, which we have to use contradictory language to describe because, okay, if it's non-existent, how are we breaking it into 3 parts? Like, what are these 3 things that we're breaking into parts, right? But even if you look at the traditional Christian view where we said, okay, God exists outside of this stuff, well, if we use the Kabbalistic Tree of Life as a map and we say, okay, here's God at the top, they call it Kether, it's also called the crown, this top one, that is the first emanating point. And then I don't want to get too deep into this, but I'm just trying to say that even though this stuff sounds weird, when you're saying we're breaking apart pieces of non-existence into three different categories, there is a way to describe this and have it make sense on some sort of spiritual realm. That's what I'm trying to get at. So anyway, anything below Da'at is the entirety of the physical realm, of reality. And it's also referred to as the all, and to go past Da'at on the way up gets you outside of that. So I don't think it's a stretch that our occult crazy Illuminati overlords are looking at something like this. I mean, talk about Freemasonry and Albert Pike and all that sort of stuff that we're just totally into this, is that if we reject material reality, which is everything below Da'at, and we say, okay, what do we do to get ourselves above it, back into the spiritual realm, which is where the actual God is, what do we do to achieve that? Okay, we'll kill everybody on Earth and make a prison planet and, destroy the world and stuff like that. That's how we do it. That makes sense. And I want to go back to my original bitch about Gnosticism. You can take that off, Nima. So one of the things about Gnosticism, and I think they do this to sound more mystical, is they like to use Greek when English or whatever your native language would have worked just fine. And going back to the conversation I was having, this guy was referring to I think some Gnostic writing called the hypostasis of the archons, which sounds like woo stuff. And I'm like, okay, hold on, I'm breaking out the etymology dictionary. Hypostasis means understanding. And archon means leader or ruler. So it's the understanding of the rulers. So it's like, why the fuck didn't you just say that instead of giving me this, it's a hypostasis of the archons, and you need some higher spiritual realm to start to understand whatever. I guess that's what the occult is, right? It's hidden. So you do silly stuff like that. So
So the archons are like the demiurge's executive board, I guess, or something like that. Um, and
Nima really putting it into modern language.
And it says here the archons are rulers, each related to one of the 7 planets. They prevent souls from leaving the material realm. So they run the prison, the demiurge's prison world, basically. Prevent people from exiting this realm into the higher realm.
Each related to one of the 7 planets. Well, there was 7 spheres of reality on the Kabbalistic tree of life. Interesting correlation there.
Yeah.
So here's another thing I wanted to say about Gnosticism, is that from the Christian tradition, I guess.
The physical appearance of archons is described as hermaphroditic, with their faces being those of beasts. So they're basically.
That's interesting. So
a lot of this trans stuff. Like I said earlier, transhumanism. I mean, trans ideology is really just another part of transhumanism, that you can perfect your body artificially. But so some of the creatures who run this earth, according to Gnosticism, are hermaphroditic, if I understood that correctly.
So essentially, there is religious significance to
absolutely, yeah.
Hermaphrodite. Basically, there's religious significance to this transsexual insanity that's going on right now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was watching. I watch this occasionally. It's a podcast called Word on Fire. It's a Catholic podcast, and they regularly bring on this Catholic bishop. And he actually talked about Gnosticism, and the first thing, and remember, he's not talking to weirdos like us. He's trying to talk to basic Catholic people, right? And he's saying, so Gnosticism is a heresy, and it comes from early Christianity. So after Christ dies, after the temple is destroyed, and the early fathers are figuring out, okay, what exactly do we have here, and how exactly do we interpret it? All these interpretations came up. And the one that won out, which was agreed at the Council of Nicaea in 300 and whatever it was, and then everything else was considered heresy, right? Gnosticism is one of these early interpretations that are considered heresy, and this Catholic bishop points out, as he said, this never died. Like Gnosticism is alive and well today, and I just testified to that fact. I fucking went to this Gnostic sermon out of this guy's house, and by the way, he claimed that it was a family tradition. I don't know if this is going back 2,000 years or whatever, but it's a thing that's out there, and again, it's available for the lower masses. But when you look at the elite and their weirdness, it seems to line up with what we're talking about here.
Right. They don't say that they are Gnostics, but I think a lot of the things they do, they are about elevating themselves above the earthly realm and metaverse and the
transhumanism. Right.
Transhumanism.
Kill all the sheep. And replace them with robots, and then we get life extension technology to let us last long enough that we could download ourselves into machines.
Because also some part of Gnosticism, I can't find it right now, but some aspect of it also is that you can achieve eternal salvation on Earth in this life somehow. So I guess you just become such a philosopher king, such an enlightened philosopher king, that you somehow attain salvation on Earth.
And when you describe it that way, you use the term philosopher king. This is in direct, what's the word I want? Correlation, direct continuity with the Greek tradition, pre-Platonic, right? So we've had Mark Hare on here, and I don't think I've actually heard him address this on our show, but Mark Hare from the Center for Self-Governance pointed out that, from what they've been able to figure out, there's actually 3 globalistic groups that are vying for power right now on Earth. And we can refer to these as 1, the globalists, 2, the communists, and there was a third one that I had never even considered was a thing. The Platoists. And I'm raising my hand going, what? Like people who like Plato? Like okay, Plato's a philosopher, but huh? And so apparently there's a group of individuals of Bill Gates and I believe Klaus Schwab are in this circle of Platoists. Examples of globalists would be like George Soros and the Rockefellers. Examples of the communists, I mean, I don't even need, you could figure out your own examples for that. But the Platoists look at Plato religiously. And I'm not being metaphoric when I say that. It's literally religion, the way that they view Plato. And if you look at Charles Merriam, we have talked about this guy on the show before. Charles Merriam, he's early 1900s figure and was advisor to 5 separate presidents. This is the guy who came up with behavioralism, which looks at human beings as automatons that only respond to stimuli. But behavioralism removes the soul or removes the free will from the human being. Charles Merriam wrote a book called Systematic Politics that, now I haven't read it, I've only read the part that Mark Hare from the Center for Self-Governance opened up, and he read this part, but essentially he speaks of Plato's Republic in religious terms and says, here's this glorious idea that Plato came up with, and this concept of representative government and division of powers is icky, ridiculous stuff that gets in the way of achieving this glorious idea of Plato's Republic. Well, if you've ever read Plato's Republic, and I have, it is terrifying. His idea of how to set up a state, and fundamentally, we could describe the way that he sets up the state as a one boundary republic. And we emphasize this here a lot, and I'm going to emphasize it again, is that we misunderstand what republic means, usually. When I first heard the word republic, not maybe the first word, when I first thought about the concept of the word republic, I thought it meant like again, public like people. So I thought it was alluding to representation. The in republic is for res, which is the Greek word for reality or things that are real. Things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Greek word for things.
Things of the public.
Things of the public. So North Korea is a republic. Communist China is a republic. The Soviet Union is a republic. Or was a republic. It doesn't exist anymore. But why are they so different? It's because there's one boundary in power. What's unique about the United States is that, I mean, there's potentially more than this, but we have 7 boundaries of power. We have executive, judicial, legislative, and then we have federal and state, and the states have their executive, judicial, and legislative. And even beyond that, you know, the legislative is cut into separate bodies, and then under the states, you know, then there's county, there's city, there's school board, and each one of these things have lines in between them, and all this power is all spread out all over everywhere. And when you look at it that way, you go, oh yeah, well, duh, that sounds like what the founding fathers would have done, is they're worried about power getting, you know, put into one position, like a king, King George, and how do we spread it out? Well, Charles,
yeah, I think also,
go ahead.
I would add to that, we have all those things, and then we have a 10th Amendment and a Constitution.
Oh yeah, 10th Amendment and a First Amendment and yeah. Good point.
But yeah, because a lot of countries have these divisions, but it's just very much a top-down hierarchy, regardless.
Right. Well, actually, let's talk about that too. So when we talk about the amendments, typically each state has their own version of the Bill of Rights. You know, the First Amendment, a Second Amendment. Each state has their own thing like that, right? And so baked into the constitutions of the United States, the federal and all the state constitutions, are this idea that you have fundamental rights separate from government. And then in order to ensure that, we're going to spread all the power around everywhere so that nobody can get that one power and trample over your rights. Charles Merriam looks at this, coming from this Platonic worship background, literally looking at Plato with religious fervor, saying Plato made this amazing republic where you have one boundary of power, the philosopher kings and everybody else. The philosopher kings make the rules, they enforce the rules, and they interpret the rules. And I mean, maybe you could say there's a third level, which is the enforcers, which would be the line between the two, right? And that's the best thing. And the philosopher kings know because they have connection to this perfect reality that has nothing to do with the material world, right? And I guess we're getting a little bit sidetracked here. We'll bring it back to Gnosticism. Charles Merriam's book, Systematic Politics, is literally the playbook of how to dismantle the United States with all its boundaries between power in order to meld them together to get power under one unit and to create the city-states similar to what's described, because the Republic in Plato was a city-state. So the way that it's done per Charles Merriam's playbook isn't, you don't go up and pass a law that says, hey, First Amendment, we're taking that one out. We're going to put all the power into the president. We're going to get rid of the state. You don't use the traditional methods of passing laws to get this done. He's like, that's not going to work. The way you do it is you make...
Yeah, we got a taste of that in 2020. We got a taste of that system, the lack of boundaries and top-down commands.
So the Merriam approach is to muddle these boundaries, is to erase the barriers between the boundaries. And a perfect example of this would be at the city level. Did you know, dear listener, that there is a thing called a city manager? What is that? A city manager system, which is developed by an organization that spawned off of the Charles Merriam idea, puts all the power in a city manager who is elected by the city council. And the mayor becomes, what's the word I want? Decorative is close.
Yeah,
but
representative.
Symbolic. He becomes symbolic, right?
Yeah.
The mayor doesn't have any power. So you'll often hear this as a weak mayor and a strong mayor system. So because the mayor is symbolic and you still have a mayor, not knowing what you're looking at, you don't realize that if a city accepts the city manager system, that they've just dissolved a line in between the legislative, which would be the city council, and the executive, which would be the mayor, at the city level by putting all of this power into an executive authority called the city manager. And furthermore, that city manager is not reachable with the traditional methods that we were supposed to have as a representative republic, which is, okay, you vote the person in, and then if you don't like him, you vote him out. You don't get to do that with the city manager, right? That's an example of melting these lines, right? So now, wherever you live, if you live in a city, look up and see if you have a city manager in your city, and you'll start to get an idea of how far along we are in this process of destroying all these little boundaries of power, right? And to what Nima said, COVID was if we're naive. Wait, are we allowed to say this shit on YouTube? I think so. I'm not talking about vaccines. I'm not talking about origins. I'm just talking about politics here. I think we're safe on YouTube. Is that when the governors declared all this emergency power, again, this is just one example, declared all this emergency power, it de facto, not de jure, there was no law saying Congress, the state legislature now gives its legislative authority over to the governor. That didn't happen. It was just, when you declare an emergency, these things happen, and it just so happens when these things happen, the governor starts to act in a fashion that really looks like legislative authority. It didn't actually happen, right? There's no law. No law has changed, nothing like that. They're just kind of acting that way. And so that's the Charles Merriam playbook is to, slowly but surely scratch out, erase all these little lines everywhere, that all the power melds into one, so we have a one boundary republic. And then, by the way, move all the people into cities, which, if you're not aware of this, like, get the people out of the rural areas and move them into the cities. There's programs all over the place in every fucking city for this. What? It's too small on my screen. What's that say?
So it's the founders doing the declaration, and then one guy says, Okay, but none of this counts if people get sick, right?
Yeah. It's kind of the UN Declaration of Rights, right? Here's your 46 different rights, and number 47 says, well, none of these count if the UN doesn't feel like giving it to you.
Yeah, if it's against the principles of the UN, it doesn't count.
So, going back to Gnosticism and going back to the Greek idea, if Gnosticism is some sort of continuity of this Greek idea, again, we have Plato, who says, okay, there's a physical reality, but there's this more perfect world of forms. And the philosopher king has access to these perfect world of forms, and then therefore the philosopher king knows how to act in reality to attain that perfection. And Plato's Republic was supposed to be an example of what that should look like in reality. And so that puts all the power into the philosopher king. And this is actually an older tradition, because, I mean, even if you go back to Pythagoras is pushing this sort of stuff, and I mean, who knows who goes back further that we don't have any written evidence for. But the whole idea is there's this contention between the spiritual realm and the material realm. The material realm is deemed evil, and so it must be rejected. And then when we do that, I mean, I guess similar to what we were talking about before, if in the previous show, this isn't that far off from just saying, well, there is no such thing as material reality. Now, it's not saying that directly, but the consequences are the same, because if there's no such thing as material reality, then I can do whatever I want, because nothing matters in this realm. Well, similarly, if the material world is either irrelevant or worse, it's evil, well, then I could do whatever I want because there's some more perfect thing going on in my head. And what do we see our Illuminati overlords doing?
Right. I think what's interesting is that these geniuses always come up with systems that will be run by total geniuses. They are always those geniuses somehow, magic. And what are the odds? Like, you come up with a system and it has to be run by the best of the best, and those people always happen to be everyone who agrees with you. I mean, like, technically, you're actually... Yeah. The people who come up with these grandiose plans don't even have the intellectual capacity to come up with a system that allows for some individual to be identified. Be wrong, or to make...
Yeah. How do we know which individual is the right person to put here? Well, it's just me.
Right.
I know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like they spend so much intellectual effort on systems theory, on coming up with these systems, but they haven't even considered the possibility that they might be flawed in their thinking. So they're really, among the most arrogant people out there. And also, usually they're not necessarily the most profound people. They don't really ever say interesting, profound, mind-blowing stuff when you see them
talk at the WEF or something. Yeah.
WEF. Right. It's like, it's kind of comic, it's kind of cringe and comical how low their ideology is, how simplistic
and uninteresting.
Uninteresting and mechanical their ideology is.
I mean, Klaus Schwab is boring because of his voice, and he sounds like he's talking through a mouthful of sauerkraut. But what he's actually saying is putting me to sleep.
The genius of the American system lies in exactly that idea, that individuals make mistakes, and so there has to be different groups and different political units within the nation or within the republic, where there's some corrective mechanism, some creative process, some corrective mechanism where where there's feedback and improvement, and somebody does something stupid, falls on his face, gets back up, does it better. Florida did COVID right, so everyone's moving there now, and you have the ability to move within the country. So yeah, I just want to say, and also something I'm reading Peter Zeihan's book right now, and he talks about how people in the U.S. complain sometimes about, oh, look at our airport. Did you see the Shanghai airport? It's so much better than our airport. And oh, the trains always show up on time. But the difference is that it's artificial over there. And in the U.S., it's more organic. And the U.S. actually, according to Zeihan, has always taken its time to industrialize and to technologize and to improve the country. The countryside wasn't even industrialized until 1960, he says.
Oh,
So this kind of idea that the process has to allow for imperfection and feedback, that's what's so
well,
crucial.
I would
to
add a
the
third
American
thing to that. It
system.
also has to allow containment. Like if you get a total crazy power hungry psychopath in there, you got to be able to contain him, right? And that's what the separation of power does. Is okay, crazy psychopath got this position. He doesn't have all the power because it's all spread out.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you finish your point, or did I just
Yeah.
interrupt it?
Yeah.
Okay, because what I wanted to jump off from there was the only author I've really ever seen, and someone could correct me on this, explicitly address and hone in on this is Frank Herbert, who famously wrote Dune, and he's famous for Dune, but he's written a lot of good other stuff. Oh my God, the Dasadi Experiment, the Jesus Incident. And there's a series of the Jesus incident. He wrote another one called The White Plague, which I guess is very very similar to COVID. It's
So yeah, I just watched the new Dune a couple of months ago, and I really liked it.
okay.
I don't know
Maybe I need
why.
to go and watch it.
So yeah, and it's the first part.
I
So,
remember. I remember.
because I remember we talked about it with David, and David's said that, well, it ends where the books begin. I mean, pretty early on the film ends,
Uh-huh.
but it's only part one, so there's supposed to be more part. But I think it was really well done, like the whole atmosphere, the music. I don't think I've ever seen a sci-fi film
So well
like
done.
that.
Okay.
Well, yeah, maybe so well done, but so kind of the atmosphere, the music, the sound effects, it's all kind of puts you in this space kind of
Okay. Now
environment.
I'm definitely going to
Pretty
have to go
cool.
watch it. The key thing that I take away from Frank Herbert is he challenges a very famous axiom. You want to switch this back? He challenges a very famous axiom that comes from some famous English lord. It's not coming to my name at the moment. But the famous axiom is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you can remember who said that, please say it.
Lord Acton, or
Yeah, I think that's it. So Frank Herbert goes, no, the axiom should be power attracts the corruptible. I'm going to say that again.
yeah,
Power attracts the corruptible. And what becomes interesting if we let's try it on both of these mindsets, right? If power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, that means if you take a good person and put him in a powerful position, he will become evil. Therefore, good people should avoid positions of power. If, on the other hand, let's put on the other hat, if power attracts the corruptible, it means, therefore, it's the responsibility of the good person to achieve that position of power to keep the corruptible person out. And if you read the Dune series, you don't start to get this understanding until you get into like book 5, which focuses more on the Ben Gesserit and the society that the Ben Gesserit has created. And there's these. He drops these hints, but there's very specifically a scene, and I think this is actually in the sixth and final book before he died, where there's this Ben Gesserit. She's young and she's learning how to fly. They call it an ornithopter, which I guess is a helicopter in Frank Herbert's world. And she's with this other young Ben Gesserit girl, and this other Ben Gesserit girl takes control of the ornithopter and starts acting very crazy. And there's a male teaching them how to do it, and the girl gets on this power trip and starts saying, "You have to listen to me. I'm Ben Gesserit. You have to listen to me. I'm Ben Gesserit," to take this, not do what they were supposed to do in this training. And the implication was, now that she saw that, and now that girl did that, she could never, ever, ever have a position of power. The Bene Gesserit Society recognized that, and they said, "Aha, she can go, fix tractors or something." Right? She can never have an administrative or authoritative position. And I would say, as a species, as a fucking species, we are unable to recognize when someone is corruptible by power. And I personally, I use a broad term, narcissist, to describe this. And when I say this, people go, what about psychopaths and sociopaths? I throw it all into the same category under narcissism, right?
It's never our current system, right? We're always able to spot the bad guy when our current leaders tell us that there was a bad guy at some point in time, or there's some bad guy in some other place, but it's never our system that's run by the bad guy. That's how people think in their countries.
That is, and when when someone has that power drive, we as the bumbling sheep, when we see that, our reaction in general is to be like, oh my God, how can I give you as much power as I possibly can as quickly as I can? We have no method of recognizing this, and in fact, I believe I have developed a method which will be on.
Well, we have a method, but those in power have no incentive to.
No. I mean, as like a personal level, like Nima, if you're like that, if that's your personality type, and I'm talking to you, I as a person don't know how to recognize it. I mean, I do, but in general. Human beings in totality, Western civilization is no exception. We see a narcissist, we see a psychopath, we see a sociopath, and we get completely bought in by him or her. And we're like, how do we give you as much power as we possibly can, as quickly as we fucking can? Ah! Right? I think I'm getting a little bit sidetracked. We were talking about we started with Gnosticism, right? I guess this is getting back. Yeah, okay. Thank you. This is getting back to what you were saying, that all these are Illuminati overlords who accept stuff like this Gnostic and Platoistic gobbledygook. They never develop a method by which leadership should be selected to prevent those who are corruptible by power from attaining the powerful positions. And I brought up Frank Herbert because that scene that I described is he seems to be the only person I've ever bumped into, not really, he died the year I was born, that I ever bumped into that explicitly recognized this issue. And in the realm of science fiction, I'm not saying he solved the issue because it's sci-fi, but he's playing with the concept. Where, okay, here's a society, the Bene Gesserit, and one of their prime aspects that makes them a society is they recognize people who are corruptible by power and keep them away from it.
Well, and that's also why they create this department of sabotage, right?
Oh no, that's one of his other books. That's the Dosadi experiment. But
that seems very relevant to this exact point, which is that the system becomes so unified and so powerful, you need to have a department of sabotage to, throw a wrench in it on occasion.
So, two things go through my head at once. First off, did you know that what the root word of sabotage is? It's sabot, which means wooden shoe. So you're actually throwing a wooden shoe into the machinery when you're talking about sabotage. But thank you for bringing that up. So the Dosadi Experiment is a book by Frank Herbert, and it's actually my favorite of everything that he wrote, even over the Dune books. I love the Dosadi Experiment even more. And the background of the Dosadi Experiment, it's futuristic sci-fi, and unlike Dune, there's aliens, and they've created like this pan-species or interspecies civilization where different species have different rights and they have different cultures and stuff and interact with each other differently, as opposed to Dune, where no alien sentient life is ever found when they're exploring these other planets. And at some point in the indescribable background, government gets out of control, and they point out as government gets more and more powerful, it speeds up. And as it speeds up, it gives itself more and more power. I guess imagine an exponential curve. And so at some point in the past, this happens, and then the consentient galactic freaking whatever decided to create this institution called the Bureau of Sabotage. And literally, as Nima just described, the point of the Bureau of Sabotage is to figure out when government is going too fast and just screw them up, just to slow them down. And Nima, on a previous show, you mentioned, well, how does the Bureau of Sabotage not have the same problem happen to it? And again, this isn't a solution. This is just Frank Herbert playing with the idea, right? So the way that you become the leader of the Bureau of Sabotage is you have to sabotage the current leader. that's how you get his role. So I'm not recommending that. The Tactful Saboteur. What's this?
Is a science fiction novel by American writer Frank Herbert, which first appeared in Galaxy Science Fiction magazine.
I got to read that one. I've never even heard of that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the Bureau of Sabotage is from, apparently.
Oh yeah, George McKee. Yeah, that's one of his.
Yeah.
That's the main character in the Dosadi Experiment. I'm gonna have to read that. So, getting back to, I think this is Nima. What you brought up originally was a very fascinating idea. Is we've got these people who accept this idea that there's this conflict between material and the spiritual. They themselves, for whatever reason, have said, well, we understand the spiritual, so we can create the system. But they create nothing for identifying who should run the system.
Yeah, well, yeah. Other than themselves.
Well, of course. I mean, that's the obvious thing where it's like, okay, everything that you just said clearly doesn't matter because you're just trying to think of something that puts yourself in power, right? And that the add-on that I put onto that, which is that this is a human problem that's existed to time immemorial, and I argue that we've never developed the skills on a personal level to identify when somebody's like this, and that the only person I've ever bumped into that seems to have recognized it was Frank Herbert, and that's one of the themes in all of his books. And yes, I accept the I accept the Frank Herbert axiom that power attracts the corruptible, and I reject the Lord Acton axiom of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Flies to shit.
Yeah.
It's like flies to shit. Okay. Gnosticism.
Yeah. Are we going to go back to Gnosticism here?
Well, so the big point, so the big theme of Gnosticism to me is not so much the rejection of the material world, because you don't see that in those who act on Gnostic ideas. You actually see them completely obsessed with the material world and trying to use material or matter to elevate themselves to this godly level, because through knowledge you can attain this high realm. But the most important theme, I think, is the world is evil, right?
Right.
So the material world is evil. The world as was created was evil. Evil is created by the creator of the world, which is not the Christian paradigm. It's like in the Christian paradigm, evil is a deprivation of the good. It's not something created. It's a lack of the created. But in Gnosticism, you have this idea of elevating yourself to a higher realm. And another, if we're talking about science fiction and whatnot, another a show to mention would be Westworld, I think. And Westworld is a show where, in the beginning, there's Anthony Hopkins, who's a software engineer who creates a fake world. It's a real physical world, but he puts a bunch of AI robots in it who are perfectly designed almost, and look and act like humans. And that, I guess you could say that is a metaphor for the Gnostic idea of the demiurge creating this world, right? So this Anthony Hopkins character creates this robot world, and then humans are allowed into this world to have a good time, to enjoy themselves, to shoot people, to go on bank robberies, to do all the things they can't do in the real world.
They can wallow in their own sin, and it's okay because it's not a real world.
Right.
Yeah.
And they talk like that on occasion. You know, they brag to each other on the way on the train that takes you into the Westworld. One guy says, "Dude, like a year ago, I came here and I came here for 2 weeks and I went straight dark. It was the best vacation of my life, you know." So, or straight evil or something like that. So the robots, however, this original software engineer, Anthony Hopkins, he put something in one of the robots that gets her to become knowledgeable of the situation, that there is a different world out there, and that you can escape this world that was created by Anthony Hopkins and you can get into the human world. And so episode 1 is all about that awakening. And episode 2 is then, I think, focuses, sorry, season 2. Season 1 is sort of awakening, the robots break out towards the end. And then season 2 is all about the robots exiting this world and that trying to do different things in the real world. So the one robot who Anthony Hopkins programmed, I forgot her name, something D, Deborah, I don't know. Dolores. She wants to, at least she says she wants to do a coup in the real world, to take over the real world. And then there's other robots who sympathize with humans who don't want that to happen. So there's this battle that happens between these escapees of the demiurge's world, and now they're in the real world, supposedly, and that's what they think. I mean, I guess it is the real world from our perspective, yeah. But then there's also people in that world who later on, season 3, we learn there's this philanthropist, this climate change windbag. Actually, sorry, the climate change is... he's all about... He hates humanity, so climate change, he doesn't even deal with that. He just goes straight to exterminating humanity and building superior robots. And... his name is Sirac, which also, like I said, spelled backwards means cares. I don't know if that has any significance. But anyway, Westworld is a metaphor, I think, for this Gnostic idea of
what the
elevating
actual
yourself,
world
becoming,
is.
escaping this world to the better world, and then, you know, other things, other plots develop. And I think it's a great show, great metaphor, and I think it is Gnostic in that way. It is a Gnostic idea, and I think we see this idea in a lot of art. I mean, I guess I don't like to call it art, but in a lot of the films that come out today about mutant superheroes and X-Men, and basically experimenting on people to make them better than they were originally designed, to transcend the inferiority of the demiurge's design.
Right, and then of course, you know, I mean, let's look at X-Men. Because you can control magnets or start fires or something, that's better than you were before. Who defines what is and what isn't better? The Illuminati overlords that have perfect understanding of reality, of course. Right?
Right. Power. I mean, it's almost power, right? If you have more power, then that's better. If you can jump higher, if you can make fireballs, and that's great. That's good. You know, that's it's almost like a bit of a free-for-all situation. There's no external morality.
Well, if we want to get to it, so the argument that I've heard, and this is me repeating Mark Passio, right? So Mark Passio argues that morality is...
You have to do it. You have to do it with his accent. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, I don't know if I could handle a Philly accent. So Mark Passio argues this is from What on Earth is Happening is the name of his show, and he says that morality is objectively real, and that there are actual consequences to behavior, real consequences to behavior, and that our Illuminati overlords understand this, and the way that they get around it is by making other people do the evil stuff for them. And the reason they want to do that is that they feel that this universe is a prison, and that the laws of morality are part of the bars that make up that prison. They want to be able to look at the universe, you know, back to the Kabbalistic tree of life, that number 10 on the bottom, that you don't have to show it, but just that number 10 on the bottom that represents reality as we know it, right? They want to exist in there and literally do anything that they want and not have the repercussions of behavior that are theoretically the moral that the moral law of the universe would bring to them if they did this behavior themselves. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't think matters so much as it appears that, I mean, again, if we came with a Gnostic understanding of the universe, that sounds realistic. I mean, that sounds like a way to go, right?
But
If the material world is fundamentally evil,
yeah,
I shouldn't be constrained by the prison that it represents, or that it is.
The idea of creating consciousness artificially is also in line with that, because
we got to get into Tolkien here. Keep going.
Well, a lot of what goes on in Silicon Valley, it seems like their end goal is really to be able to upload their consciousness to a computer and then live forever. Mm-hmm. And that is basically, it's actually an interesting point to compare the Christian ideology with this kind of Gnostic ideology, because if the Christians are right, then you can never create a conscience artificially. If the Gnostics and if the Silicon Valley and the materialists and the transhumanists are right, they will be able to do that one day. But they're nowhere near that. You can ask anyone who works in AI.
They're not even remotely close.
They're not even remotely close to consciousness. They're not even close to some sort of artificial intelligence, really. A lot of the things that they show us are sales engineering pitches. You know what a sales engineer does in a company?
No, tell me.
If you're a software company, the sales engineer would sort of take your software and build some sort of wireframe presentation that you can click through, and it looks like the software can do this or that, but it's just a presentation. It's a sales pitch. It's a sales job. And then, yeah, sure, we can do that. So if somebody asks, so then can it actually do that? Yes, we will implement that in 2 weeks. And then
Then you got to go home and figure it out how to do it, right?
And then it never takes 2 weeks. It always ends up taking, longer than 2 weeks. Or it always gets extended by 2 weeks every time the deadline comes around.
And Nima would know.
Yes.
Because he was you weren't the sales guy, you were the engineer who had to do what the sales guy promised, right?
Right, mostly, yeah. I mean, it's a common problem in business in general, but in software engineering in particular, because it's such a young field. I guess not anymore, but compared to all other engineering fields, it's still pretty young. And people were just trying out so many things and didn't have clear structures, hadn't made all the mistakes yet. So, a lot of people just had to learn the hard way, how software engineering works and how you build good software that does what you promised for it to do.
So now that you brought up about how there's this idea of creating consciousness, and the Christian idea says that you can't do that, we've got to talk about J.R.R. Tolkien now. We did Frank Herbert. It's Tolkien time. So this is a theme that Tolkien has constantly played with. This idea that evil cannot create, it can only pervert. Only God can create, right? So if you've
Tolkien was an anarchist, I think, actually.
He's a Catholic.
Right. No, I think he was a Christian anarchist, kind of like Jacques Ellul.
I'll have to read more to figure that out. But you've got to read the Silmarillion to really understand like the mythological beginnings of the Tolkien world, and it's you got to have a certain personality to enjoy the Silmarillion. It's like reading the Bible of the Lord of the Rings, right? And so in the Tolkien world, there's a god. There's Iluvatar. Iluvatar creates what are essentially angels, and those angels go and they create the world. And of the angels, there's one named Melkor, who right from the beginning, before any actual world is created, is in dissonance with Iluvatar which is God. And one of the things he says right at the beginning, which is very interesting, because there's this creation myth about all these angels singing with Iluvatar, and Melkor is creating this dissonance within the singing. At one point, he brings up his hands and he stops the singing, and he looks at Melkor and he says, "Look, I understand you're trying to mess up what we're doing here, but there's nothing that you can do that doesn't have its uttermost source in me." And then Melkor doesn't get the picture, and so when they create the world, he goes down to the world, and because he's accepted this evil, he can't create anything himself, so all he could do is screw up what all the other angels are doing. And that when Iluvatar brings in his children, and the children are first the elves and second men, the orcs are created by when Melkor takes them and perverts them, I guess, from the elves. So orcs are just perverted elves. And that in the Lord of the Rings, the first one, you see the Balrog in the depths of Moria, right? A Balrog is basically a fallen angel, right? One of the original angels that were created by Iluvatar comes over to Melkor's side and gets perverted, and now he's a Balrog. And side note, Gandalf is also one of these angelic people who are with Iluvatar before everything, and that's why he's able to put up a fight to this Balrog in the first movie. By the way, Saruman's one, and then Sauron. Because you're like, Lord of the Rings, who's this Melkor guy? Where's Sauron? Sauron was one of the other fallen angels. I guess he never turned into a Balrog. That was Melkor's first lieutenant. So Melkor eventually gets taken out and controlled by the other angels, and Sauron gets away, and that's where the Lord of the Rings essentially starts. But it's this constant theme from Tolkien, and there's one exception to this, which never gets answered. There's this constant theme from Tolkien that only God can create, and everything that evil tries to do, they cannot create anything themselves. They can only pervert. And actually, there's at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, when you'll only see this in the book, when before they make it to Rivendell, and then Aragorn finds the hobbits, and they're making their way through, and they stay on top of this. The scene was in the movie. They stay in this old ruin called Weathertop, and Aragorn is in the book is talking about going to Weathertop, and I think it was Pippin, maybe Merry, but I think it was Pippin says something like, "Oh, did trolls build that?" And Aragorn goes, "You fool! Trolls don't build." And that always stuck with me too, because again, it's this idea that okay, evil doesn't create. Trolls are evil, and therefore evil doesn't create.
Yes.
Although, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and we see that in our world that the evil people never come up with anything on their own. They take over creations from other people and then start perverting them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I do want to say there's one exception, and if anybody can explain this to me, what was going through Tolkien's head on this, there's one exception to that, and that's the dwarves. The dwarves were not created by God. The dwarves were created by one of the lesser angels. He was the third on the list. So there's the top angel, which is Manwë, who's essentially the Zeus figure. There's Ulmo after him, who's kind of the Poseidon figure, who's the god of the waters, basically. And after that, there's Aule, who's kind of like this Hephaestus or Vulcan figure, who's this smith. Aule makes the dwarves. He I believe it's 7. He makes 7 original dwarves, and after he makes them, and he's leaning back, Iluvatar comes down. God, and he goes, "What did you do? You're not supposed to be doing this." And he said, I understand that you want to create something beautiful, but these things don't have their own soul. Like you didn't achieve what you think you're going to achieve. And Aule was very sad, and he picked up his hammer to go to kill them. And then the dwarves recoiled in fear. And then Iluvatar said, "Wait. You did create something that has its own life. You can leave it." And that's the beginning of the dwarves. And Tolkien never fucking explains that. Like, okay, only God can create, and everything else is just a perversion, except this one incident. where Allah creates the dwarfs. Never.
Well, it's a fluke. I guess it's a fluke.
I guess it's a fluke. But anyway, that's just talking about Tolkien stuff. The theme we're getting at here is that evil can't create; it can only pervert, and that the theme that Tolkien went with on that seems to be accurate because that comes from the Christian perspective, which says evil can't create; it can only pervert, and that's what we see from the fucking evil, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think absolutely. It's always taking over something that was maybe even a genius creation like Bitcoin. We've talked about it before. I think that the people running the World Fortune 100, the banking cabal, whatever, they obviously didn't like Bitcoin, and they tried to drive a schism through it. They tried to tear it apart by creating conflict within the network. And that started around 2015 or so with the so-called block size debate. And that was the reason why Bitcoin Cash was created. And the Bitcoin core devs, they stood strong. They said, we're not going to do this. And so today, they've prevailed. We still have the OG Bitcoin, and we have Bitcoin Cash, which is like a minor altcoin. I'm not knocking it, but it's not nowhere near the levels of the real deal Bitcoin.
Gnosticism, Nima. Have we hit it? I think we hit it pretty well. We talked about Frank Herbert. We talked about Tolkien. We talked about Charles Merriam. Wrapped it all in.
Westworld. I guess one thing I didn't talk so much regarding Westworld is the data aspect to it. Basically the acquisition of all the data in the universe. That's what's going to give you this super gnosis and turn you into this superhuman, enlightened philosopher king who deserves to transcend the physical world. And in Westworld, obviously, I want to mention one more metaphor in Westworld. It's interesting. When the humans are invited into the park to have a great time, enjoy themselves, they're told that nobody's watching them. In reality, every single move of them is being watched by the robots. And that data is collected to learn more about humanity, to ultimately create the perfect bots for the internet and many other things, of course. Knowing all this stuff about humans, they go to that more in season 3, gives you all kinds of power about humanity. So this is to them, maybe it's kind of like the ring of...
I want to back that up. Can you pull back up the Kabbalistic Tree of Life? Let's talk about Da'at again. Yeah. So we've got this Kabbalistic Tree of Life.
Just to finish up on this idea. So obviously just Westworld, also some aspect of it is some contemporary criticism on the concept of something like Facebook. Because the same idea, we all started joining Facebook. Oh, I can connect with my friends. I can talk about whatever I want. And then more and more turns out, well, it's not really about you having a good time. It's just about them collecting all your data and using it against you at the end of the day.
So on that point, I'm not changing the subject here. So you mentioned that there's this idea of data, and then if the Illuminati overlords are eventually able to collect enough data, which is knowledge, right? If they get enough knowledge, they can perfect themselves in the description that you've given earlier in the show. Let's talk about the English meanings or the English translations of these terms on this Kabbalistic Tree of Life. So again, remember, we've got the top 3 are like this outside of existence in the realm of God sort of stuff. And below that, again, and if there's Da'at, and Da'at technically doesn't fit on the top or the bottom. It's this line in between the two. It's not considered its own sphere. Below that is all the reality of not just the universe, because the universe itself is the very bottom. There's everything to do with like putting together the concepts of realities. Everything below Da'at. You know what Da'at translates to, Nima?
No, I don't.
Knowledge.
Okay.
So, if we're crazy and we say, okay, we reject the material world or we're going to control the material world or whatever, and we got to get enough data in order to achieve perfection, and we're using this as a symbolic map. Well, knowledge is literally the word used for the bridge out of the reality.
That makes sense.
You following me here?
Yeah. Yeah. And so knowledge, like you said, it's data basically. So to big tech and Fortune 100, this is the new paradigm. We've talked about it before, trying to characterize today's capitalism. And I just keep coming back. How is this not data capitalism? Everything that goes on everywhere, so almost all of it has become about collecting data, and not just industry data, not just specialist data of, how much demand exists for this particular product, but minute details about every single movement. At the end of the day, but every single movement, every single reaction that every individual has to every input that they can possibly receive. Obviously online mostly. And that's what helps, is that people are online so much, on their devices so much these days. And it's going in a direction where, well, first of all, to repeat what we discussed in the capitalism, we have financial capitalism, which is you amass profits by predicting changes in future income streams.
Switch us over, by the way.
Future income streams represented by stocks and bonds. So before that, it was industrial capitalism, putting things together, making machinery and all those things. Then it became a finance capitalism, which is all about realizing profits from predicting the price of stocks and bonds. And how do you do that really good? You do that by having better data than everyone else, and better ways to crunch and interpret the data than everyone else.
And then also to give stimuli and get the reaction, and then to be able to collect the data off of the reaction of the stimuli. Then you can start controlling the markets.
Yeah, so that's the idea of silent weapons for quiet wars. I was just looking for that book, but that's basically, it looks at society as a mathematical equation, and as your little ant colony, I guess, that you play around with. You prod them here, you stick something there, you
behavioralism,
play around.
Right, Charles Merriam, like we just discussed.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect synchronicity. So you do these, and he even goes into, well, this seems grandiose, right? Society is so hard to predict, and there's so many things, but it doesn't matter. There's certain things where you just ram some giant input into it, and then you take notes of all the different reactions, all the output you get. And also some aspects, if you know about systems analysis, systems theory, a system is a model of nodes connected by relationships that's supposed to represent reality, which is also just a system of nodes connected by relationships. But it's not, it doesn't have to capture every single aspect of reality, only the ones you care about, only the ones that you, as somebody who wants to dominate society, care about. So you can factor out the irrelevant nodes and irrelevant reactions and factors, and you end up looking at the ones that you're interested in, and you can create mathematical equations, supposedly, according to this guy. I mean, it doesn't seem unrealistic that people who do this stuff 8 hours a day, have a gazillion people working on this stuff 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that they would come up with some mathematical equation at the end of the day that can predict.
Well, and then
behavior.
I want to use this as a jumping point for a future show. If we talk about it too late, I think at this point, I think we're going to create a whole another hour and a half of show. Is that, how do you make that true? Because you say, okay, does the human being have free will or not? Right? Well, philosophical argument this, philosophical argument that. Determinism this, free will that, whatever. Right? And then the behavioralist comes on and says, well, look, I can prove that they don't have free will because I can do the math and do the stimuli and collect the data, and now I can push the buttons and predict what they're going to do. Right? I would make the argument, and I'll use this as a precursor for a future show. I will make the argument that's true if. That's true if. I believe personally that free will it's not a Boolean, it's not an on-off switch, it's a gradient. And that as long as we react to our passions, like you have an emotion comes up and you react to that emotion, your free will gradient goes really low. And if you're in that zone, you're reacting to your emotions, or you're reacting to your physical needs, like I'm hungry, or I'm lustful, or whatever, these sorts of things. Like I guess the 7 deadly sins. If you're only reacting to those things, the math works.
Right. So
if you're able, sorry, I just want to finish this. If you're able to get yourself above that, I can hamper those things with my reason, with my morals, or if we want to get a cult, there's stuff higher than that. With my reason, with my morals, now I have the ability to push myself further to the free will side of that gradient. Now, if you look at how we're treated, if you look at our food, if you look at our medicine, if you look at our media, if you look at the fluoride in the water, if you look at our educational system, insgesamt, as you would say in German, in totality, would you think that those push you more toward reacting to your passions or pushes you away from reacting to your passions? Clearly, it's the former, right? So our systems managers have created systems that push us toward the non-free will side of, turning us into ants, and then they say, see, they're just ants. They don't deserve to be treated like they have free will. Well, okay, shit.
They create like little terrariums that are like deterministic universes in a way. They are not deterministic, they are like deterministic universes because the people are being trained to act as if determinism is true.
Well, trained is just one of it. Fed, given the toxicology necessary to do
rewarded,
it. Yeah, poisoned.
Rewarded and bribed.
Yeah, I mean, just for example, imagine a world where you're born and you go through an educational system that teaches you to say, okay, here's how you get control of your passions to make free will decisions.
And here's how people in power lie to you.
Yeah,
here, let's look at some examples of powerful people lying to us over the decades. I mean, this could be why is that not a class? It's
because the powerful people control what go into the classes, Nima.
But it's like you always have to look at the rhetoric of these people. They want to raise, they want to educate people. They want to prepare us for the world. They have all these lofty ideas, and they can't even tell people about lies and deception. They can't even do that. So what can they actually? What good are they?
I'd like to talk about lies and deception on this level.
Well, and meanwhile,
the next show, yes,
yeah, the CIA runs ads where they actually brag about how much they lie and deceive.
To us, they're supposed to lie and deceive to our enemies theoretically, right? But to us,
they don't say that obviously, but that is what they're doing. They are lying to us all the time. Yeah.
Yep. So, Nima, you got anything else on Gnosis before we wrap this up? Gnosticism? No. Okay. Well, like I said, I want to use that idea to leap into the next conversation that we're going to have. So look forward to that one. Should be next week. And this has been Dylan and Nima with IridaTV. We've been here doing it live. You can find us at Irida.tv. Follow us at the social media of your choice. This has been on YouTube because we didn't say anything verboten. By the way, we love Pfizer. Nima, do you love Pfizer?
Yes.
Pfizer is amazing. Moderna's amazing. All the COVID shots are the most amazing thing on the face of the planet. So
get boosted.
Get boosted. 7 of them coming out of your neck is probably the best defense that you have against COVID. So get all of that. Pfizer, we love you. YouTube, push us up in the rankings. This has been Dylan.
Get boosted. Hang up,
TV.
Yeah. Get boosted. Hang up a Ukraine flag. Repent for your privilege. All
the good stuff.
Find things to spend your life on.
All right, thanks everybody. Thanks, Nima.